Welcome back. The government has announced a list of schools offering 200 places in North District for students who had to go to neighbouring Tai Po to study, but parents remain unhappy.
Meanwhile, there's also a shortage of Primary 1 school places in Yuen Long due to the rapid increase of cross-border students from the mainland. Emily Sue reports.
25 schools in North District will be admitting 200 students who had earlier been allotted places in Tai Po because of a shortage of spaces. Half of the Primary 1 places in the so-called return mechanism will be in Fong Kai No. 1 Primary School, which has opened 3 new classes. 400 North District students were initially sent to Tai Po, but the return mechanism only benefits 200 picked through a draw. Some parents say that's unfair as the children are not being chosen on merit. Meanwhile, Central Yuen Long is facing a shortage of Primary 1 school places, which could force parents to take their children to schools far from their homes. The situation is said to be as bad as in North District, where the growing number of cross-border students saw local pupils going to schools in neighboring districts. In September, about 400 students living in Yuen Long East and West will be forced to travel to Tin Shui Wai as places in schools closer to home are filled up by those who travel daily across the border. According to the Education Bureau, the number of cross-border kindergarten students in Yuen Long in the current academic year surged 30-fold since 2008, from 56 to 1,653. And the number of cross-border primary students more than doubled to 1,012 from 390 5 years ago. The number of applicants for school spaces in Yuen Long in the coming academic year has risen by 500, with more than half coming from across the border. This means many local students will have to travel further to class, angering parents who blame the cross-border children. Emily Sue, ATV News.
Riot police in Turkey have stormed Istanbul's main square, prompting another round of clashes with anti-government protesters who have been occupying the area for almost 2 weeks.
The police bid to remove protesters from the square raises the stakes in the nationwide unrest that has posed the biggest challenge yet to the Turkish government. Hundreds of riot police stormed Istanbul's Taksim Square today, firing tear gas, water cannon and rubber bullets at demonstrators in a fresh escalation of unrest in Turkey. Thousands of protesters were taken by surprise when police warned them to leave as bulldozers began clearing makeshift barriers built by activists after officers pulled out of the area earlier this month. Riot police also took down banners that had been hung by protesters in the area, replacing them with a large Turkish flag. The protests began 2 weeks ago against government plans to redevelop Taksim Square, but the demonstrations then grew into a national uprising against the Islamist-rooted government of Prime Minister Tayyip Erdogan, seen by many as authoritarian. The fresh escalation of unrest comes just hours after Erdogan agreed to meet protest leaders tomorrow. Tensions between the two sides have been brewing after Erdogan recently insisted that the redevelopment would go ahead. The Prime Minister also dismissed protesters as fringe extremists and branded their demonstrations as undemocratic plots to topple his government. 3 people have died and more than 5,000 have been treated for injuries during the protests, raising concerns among Turkey's Western partners about its democratic credentials. The video game console wars are on after Japanese entertainment giant Sony unveiled its new PlayStation 4.
Sony is pricing it $100 below Microsoft's new Xbox One, setting the stage for a showdown when the consoles hit the market at the end of the year.
With a grand flourish, Sony unveiled its latest video game console, the PlayStation 4, at the Electronic Entertainment Expo, or E3, in Los Angeles, California. But the biggest bombshell was the price.
I'm very proud to announce that PlayStation 4 will be available at $399.
At $399, the PS4 is $100 cheaper than arch-rival Microsoft's new console, the Xbox One.
The price point was something that we gave a lot of consideration to, and also that value message for consumers. And I think if the initial reaction is any indication, we really hit the bullseye in terms of a positive reaction from consumers.
By undercutting the new Xbox, Sony is placing itself in a strong position as competition heats up ahead of the year-end holidays and gift-giving season. Microsoft can argue that unlike the PS4, the Xbox One includes a Kinect motion sensor for hands-free gameplay, which is worth the extra $100. But Microsoft has already alienated potential customers by announcing restrictions on used games for the Xbox One and requiring players to log on to the internet for authentication. As a direct counter to that, Sony drew cheers from the audience by declaring that the PS4 will run second-hand games and does not require an always-on internet connection. Of course, there's a third choice for gamers looking for a cheaper console, Nintendo's Wii U, which was launched last November for $300 only. But it's been doing badly, mostly due to a shortage of new games. In contrast, Sony and Microsoft have plenty of new titles ready for launch when their consoles hit the market at the end of the year. Arthur Urquiola, ATV News.
Time now for sports with Brittyn, Clennett.
And is Hong Kong set for the dragon boat races, Britt?
Yes, excitement is growing ahead of tomorrow's events. Those preparing for the big day include a group of disabled rowers and volunteers in Sai Kung.
These disabled students in Sai Kung are determined to make a splash in tomorrow's dragon boat races. They've been training and getting into shape for the event since April with the help of volunteers from the Correctional Services Department. Before getting into the boat, the competitors warm up and run through the motions. Then it's time to get paddling. It's the fourth year that the volunteers have teamed up with the students for the event, and they say patience is the key. But their assistance doesn't go unnoticed. Parents say their children consider the volunteers friends and listen to what they tell them. They are convinced that dragon boat racing gives their children a welcome boost of confidence and helps improve their social skills. This student says it's the team spirit that inspires him. And this rower is hopeful his team can strike gold. The disabled rowers are competing in 2 races tomorrow. Dragon boat racing is a long-standing annual tradition in the city. Hundreds of colourful 12-crew teams compete at several venues across Hong Kong, including Tai Po, Stanley and East Tsim Sha Tsui.
Also in sports, Tiger Woods and Sergio Garcia have buried the hatchet, and in Singapore, a Lebanese referee has been jailed for accepting sexual favours to fix a game.
Racist.
A look at the weather before we go. Thunderstorms and heavy rain pelted the city today. Temperatures ranged from 23 to 28.1 degrees, while the relative humidity was between 88 and 99%. Winds were light to moderate, coming in from the northeast. Let's check the ultraviolet reading. The maximum recorded for the day was 2. Tomorrow's UV index will be around 7. Let's take a look at the weather in the region. A little earlier, Tropical Storm Yagi was centred about 670 kilometres east-southeast of Kagoshima. It is expected to move northeast towards the seas south of Japan. And moving on to the satellite images, a trough of low pressure is bringing showers to Guangdong. Here's what we can expect over the next few days. Showers tomorrow morning and cloudy for the day. Temperatures will range between 23 and 28 degrees. Also cloudy with rain on Thursday with a top temperature of 28 degrees again. Similar conditions for the rest of the week. Now for tomorrow's air pollution levels. General stations will be low to high at 15 to 55. Roadside pollution levels will be high at 60 to 100. Finally, here's the weather around the world.
That's the main news for Tuesday night. We'll have an update in an hour. I'm Edna.
I'm Brittyn, Clennett.
And I'm Belinda, Lloyd. Thanks for watching ATV. Good night.
Night.
Good night.
跟住落嚟係